You're just so cute. I am in peak Delulu mode, okay? It's fall in my head. It's fall in my head. It's fall in my head. Welcome to my cozy little corner, and today we are talking about all of the horror books that made me a horror girly. I was such a hater to the horror genre for so long. It was just not something that I ever saw myself reading. And I have soon realized that it's not that I dislike horror. For the longest time, I felt like horror was shallow. And I have since been taught a lesson because that is not true. I would say like horror feels way more shallow in movies. And I've just never been like a horror fan when it came to movies. It just wasn't my favorite genre. But after I read a few of these books, I've realized that when an author uses horror to talk about something else, which is honestly usually the case because I hated it for so long, I don't know. I was wrong. That's all I have to say is I was wrong. So, I would say last year I started reading horror, and there are definitely a couple books that I can point fingers at that those books are the reason why I actually seek out horror now. So, before we get into this video, I think I have actually, let me check my handy dandy notebook. So, I have 8 books to talk about today. Before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and please let me know based on any of these recommendations or any of these horror books if you guys have any recommendations for me, because I'm a baby horror fan, okay? I'm a baby horror book fan, and I'm trying to find more to read. Let's get into it. I only have 8 books to talk about today, thank God, but I feel like somehow I'm going to end up talking just as much. I'm trying to keep this one short because I have a tendency to waffle. Speaking of waffling on, the first book I want to talk about is It by Stephen King. Like 7 kids who live in Derry, they all experience something traumatic and then they come back as adults and now they're fighting the same monster, and the traumaticness is the clown. I love this giant book. I love it so much that I'm rereading it for my birthday week. There's just something about it. I don't know. I don't think it's the story necessarily, and it's definitely not Pennywise. I really loved his ability to tell me 7 full coming of age stories, but also his his town, specifically the town, Derry, obviously, that it takes place in. The way that this giant book, it has these interludes where it talks about different aspects. My dog was like making laps in the room, so I had to let him out, let him be free. Anyways, what were we talking about? It. That's what we were talking about. His ability to tell 7 like full coming of age stories, which coming of age is like my favorite thing ever, but also his ability to write the atmosphere of Derry. I'm so obsessed with the way that this book feels. The only other thing that I can use as an example is I feel like it's the exact same way, the same way I felt in the way that I feel about the Night Circus. I love the way that these 2 books feel. I don't know how like else to say that, but Stephen King does these interludes throughout this giant book, and he gives like past stories and different things like that, building the lore of Derry. And I just found the town of Derry to be its own character, and I loved the way that the atmosphere in it makes me feel. It was like I think my second or third Stephen King. I digress. I really, really was scared of Stephen King for so long because of his waffle, but I'm one of those weirdos who kind of like when a book takes a long time, when an author waffles on and like overly writes the atmosphere. I love a slow book. I don't know. I never find it boring. I just find it like relaxing when a book takes its time to like really build the atmosphere. But yeah, there's really not much I can say about it that anyone else hasn't said. Obviously, there's the scene that keeps a lot of people from reading it. I personally just pretended like it didn't happen. I think that you can skip the scene knowing what it is, and you're still going to experience the same book the same way. But yes, that was it. The second book, we'll keep with the Stephen King theme, Pet Cemetery. Pet Cemetery taught me that I really like grief horror. I have since read more grief horror, and oh my god. Oh my god. I I didn't find it scary in the sense of like, ooh, like I can't sleep at night, nightmares type vibe, but I thought I don't know. I think I tend to, and this is gonna sound so weird. I tend to enjoy books based on like how talented I find the author at doing something, which I know sounds crazy. Uh, it's very meta in a weird way, but anyways, I feel like Pet Cemetery. And if you don't know what Pet Cemetery is about, it's about a, I think he's a doctor. It's about a dude and his family, and they move to a town, and there is a cemetery near their house, and there is a legend, I guess, around the cemetery that if something dies and you bury it in there, it can bring it back to life. And I'll leave it there. It wasn't scary for the horror, like the traditional horror elements of being scary. It's scary because of what the book is about is terrifying. I have also found that this book taught me that I like that. We'll get to another book that gives that as an example. Uh, but yeah, it's grief horror written at its finest. I I couldn't put it down. And the narrator for the audiobook, I'm pretty sure this is the correct one. It's the dude from Dexter. So I highly recommend the audiobook. It's so freaking good. It's so thought provoking and scary. And yeah, Pet Cemetery, my two favorite, current favorite Stephen King books. I think I need glasses. Next book I want to talk about is one of my new favorite authors. He will be, once I read all of his books, he will be one of my auto buy authors. I love the way this man writes horror so bad. I also, unintentionally, also have two books of his to talk about, and that is Stephen Graham Jones. So I read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, which is about an entity that takes revenge on five friends. Basically, five Native American friends do something bad 2 days before Thanksgiving. 4 days before? I know it's like right before Thanksgiving. And this entity basically comes back and takes revenge on all the friends. He writes what I would consider like literary horror. He goes really deep with the characters, but he also has this cadence with the way that he writes that I feel like it's hit or miss. I know some people, I just feel like you're either a Stephen Graham Jones girly or you're not. His voice is so, just the way he writes and his cadence is so unique, and I just love it. And he really leans into like the literary feeling when it comes to horror. And then the second one is I Was a Teenage Slasher. This is about a boy who is in this small Texas town, and over this course of like one summer, I think it's like only like 4 days or something like that, he becomes a slasher and he kills a bunch of people. And it's basically him recounting what happened during that summer. So it's like one of those like reflective type stories, but he like makes being a slasher like a mystical creature, like a vampire or a werewolf. There's like rules to being a slasher, and there is kind of like a timeline to being a slasher and things that like have to happen. I loved it. I read it for Summerween, and it absolutely fits the vibe for Summerween. I gave all these 5 stars, obviously, but yeah, I loved both of these books, and I don't know. I think my next Stephen Graham Jones is going to be his new book. He is writing a sequel to The Only Good Indians, which I'm very excited about. But again, I said this when it comes to Stephen King, but I like books where I like seeing what an author is capable of doing. And like Stephen Graham Jones, I just wish I wrote like that man. The way he writes his characters, and but still makes it scary. Like it's scary. I don't know. I love his writing. All right, next let's talk about a book that I feel like a lot of people disliked, but I actually really liked it. So there's an author named Paul Tremblay, and he wrote like Cabin at the End of the World or something like that, and people love that book. I want to get to that book. I haven't gotten to that book yet, but I did read Horror Movie, and I was so captivated by this book. So Paul Tremblay is another horror author that I think has a little bit more of a literary lean to him, and that typically ends up being my more favorite horror books. I just think that the way that these literary horror authors kind of use horror to talk about something specific, it's so good. It's so smart, and it scratches something in my brain. Horror Movie is about indie horror film that was being made by a bunch of like college kids. One scene got uploaded on the internet before the entire movie got shut down. The movie never got finished, but this scene became like a cult classic situation. There were like lots of people trying to like campaign to get the movie actually made. It became one of those things where like they could go to comic cons and people knew who like the creator of this horror movie, that only one piece of this horror movie was ever like made and put on the internet. And the story is about the guy who played the killer, and he is recounting, here we go again. He is recounting the experience of the movie and why the movie never got made, and so on and so forth. And so basically, there's like two timelines where you're getting when the movie was created, but you're also getting the movie being created now. And so you're getting his reflection on it before, but you're also getting like what it's taking to get this horror movie up and running. I will say that I think the ending for me is what I love about this book so much. It's one of those endings that reframe the entire story, and I think I can see why someone might find it boring. But if you do read this, you got to read it on audio because it's just got these really cool, the production's really shows the script. It shows like the script, and you hear like paper rustling, and you hear them like doing the read through, like they have multiple actors doing the read through. It's it's like a whole production. It's one of the audiobooks that I think that if I was to read it with my eyeballs, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much. And I did read this while I was at work, so it was just very entertaining. I have since realized that I like media about other media, so I really liked this horror book was about a horror movie being made. It was kind of meta in that way, so it talked about horror as a subgenre and like as a genre, and it just talked about like horror movies and like horror movies in the culture, and like why like people like horror movies, why this dude liked horror movies, why the director wanted to, but it also kind of like talked about bullying in an aspect. And yeah, just really, really enjoyed this. And this was in the very beginning of my horror journey, and it made me realize that I don't necessarily need a super crazy like grief horror, like trying to tell me something. Like this book was straight entertaining for me, and I think it's Paul Tremblay's writing. I really enjoyed Paul Tremblay's writing, so I definitely have to give him another shot. Next, let's talk about Mr. Grady Hendrix. So I have only read Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Ignore that. I'm just grabbing anything on my bed. Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I know that for a lot of people, Grady Hendrix is hit or miss. I loved this book so bad. This is a book about urban housewives who have a book club, and they start to get into like crime fiction as older white ladies do. And a bunch of stuff starts happening in their neighborhood, and there may or may not be a vampire loose, and these suburban housewives have to slay this vampire. Honestly, this was, I think, my first horror book. Yeah, I think this was the first horror book I ever read to see if I even liked the genre. I'm thanking my mother for this because I think my mom was the one that was like, this was really good and I think you'd like it. My mom is not a big horror fan either. So I was like, okay, something might be in this book. So, Grady Hendrix also, I think, does a really good job of using horror as a vessel, and also giving his characters actual characteristics. As pretentious as it sounds, I feel like a lot of horror and thriller books can sometimes, the characters can just feel like caricatures of an archetype and not like actual characters. And I really like being connected to my characters. And the characters in this were so good. I really liked how Grady Hendrix used this story as a vessel to kind of talk about like classism almost, or I guess racism in a way. He essentially talked about the idea of people being in suburban small towns and kind of not believing what they see, I guess. Like, a lot of people get away with a lot of things in this book because they look like a certain kind of person. It also makes the characters who are just supposed to be cooking and cleaning and not worrying their pretty little heads about anything, it makes them trying to solve something like this have this extra layer of like nobody wants to believe them. And it's also this extra layer of suburban towns where they're like, shh, like don't ruffle any feathers, like we're okay to ignore what's going on if it makes our community like stay quiet and drama free, and like it allows for evil to really fester because it is pushed to be kept a secret, and because certain people aren't believed and certain stereotypes are used against them. And the way he did that using absolutely horrific things like there are scenes in this book that will forever live rent free in my head. It's really terrifying, but like just phenomenal writing. But that was the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Such a long title, Grady Hendrix. We have two books to talk about, and these are fairly recent books. We're going to do my favorite one last because I just love this darn book with every fiber of my being. But let's talk about The Reformatory. It's set in Jim Crow, Florida. So deep south. It's about a 12-year-old black boy who commits a crime against a white boy, and he is sent to a reform school. Now, this reform school is as disgusting as you'd think it would be. But what makes this book so good is that, or makes it horror, I guess, other than the real life horrors of this reformatory, are is this little boy can see ghosts, or in this book they call them haints. Through being able to see ghosts and being really good at seeing the ghost, because it's not just him that can see them, but he has a almost an incredible power to see them. He's a little bit more sensitive than other people, and so he can see them better than other people. He uses his ability to see ghosts to learn about this school and learn about this school's dark, disgusting secrets. Like I already kind of said, the real horror to me in this book is not the ghosts, it is the fact that human beings can treat other human beings in this way. Like, what makes this book so scary and so disturbing is the fact that this is based on true things that have happened in our world. Reform schools were a thing. The things that happened to this little boy were a thing, are a thing, I guess, because it happened. This book will 100% make you angry. It made me angry. Like the entire book, I was just pissed off, but I didn't want to stop. And I also thought that the main character, because it is also dual timeline, so you're following the boy, but you're also following his sister, and his sister is doing everything in her power to get him out. I would say, like, I enjoyed her parts, but I enjoyed his parts more, and I enjoyed how the little boy was written. I always love, as long as it's written in like a good way, I really love when they make a character who is experiencing or witnessing a lot of adult things. I always love when they make them a kid, because it you're experiencing these traumatic events through a kid's lens, which is like completely different than experiencing them through an adult's lens. I just, if you like historical fiction and you like horror as a vessel, this, what are you doing? Don't walk, run. But yeah, that was the reformatory. I know I'm probably at a really weird angle, but I wanted to lean against my bed, so here we are. Lastly, I want to talk about, honestly, all of these books are like my favorites. Okay, so many of these books, Only Good Indians, they have made it to like my top 10 books of all time. I don't think that this book necessarily made it to my top 10 books of all time, but it's definitely a horror book to me that I literally want to get everyone I know to read it so I can talk about it with them, because everything we talked about today about horror being used as a vessel, what this author did in this book, I just can't get it out of my mind. And that is Mary by Nat Cassidy. I talked about this in my last video. I think I talked about this in my last two videos. I don't care. I'm going to keep talking about it. This is about a 49-year-old woman who lives in New York. And she is experiencing a lot of dizzy spells, a lot of mood swings, hallucinations. That's not a word. She's seeing things that aren't there. I don't feel like trying to say that word right. But yes, on top of all these things that are happening to her, she loses her job, her rent is going up. She's just really a down on their luck kind of character. And she gets a call from her aunt. She used to live in Arizona. Her aunt still lives in Arizona. Her aunt calls her up and is like, "Hey, I really need you to come take care of me because I'm dying." She doesn't want to do that because she hates her aunt. But her aunt offers her money and she really needs the money, so she goes anyways. And when she gets to this town, all of her symptoms that I just said to you are exacerbated, and she doesn't understand what's happening. She tries going to the doctor and that doesn't help. And so, with that information I gave you, essentially the book is you figuring out what is going on with Mary. Like, what is happening to Mary? Like, is she going crazy? Is something happening to her? Is this town weird because it's a little weird? Like, what is going on here? And that's the entire book. I love that this man was able to talk about an older woman in such a phenomenal way. Like, this, at its core, this is a story about an older woman that is not being taken seriously because she is an older woman. It's something that so many women deal with. There are also scenes in this book that I cannot stop thinking about. There are lines in this book that I cannot stop thinking about. I thought the way the horror was used was so clever. I honestly love the author's note at the end, maybe just as much as the book, which I know is weird. It kind of talks about whether he is allowed to talk about this character, like whether or not him as a white man is allowed to talk about the experience of this 50-year-old woman. And I don't know, it didn't make me look at the book differently. It just made me appreciate the author even more and let me know that he really took care with this character, like love and care with this character. So it just made me love it even more. But yes, honestly, I could talk about Mary all day and why I love it, but we don't have time to be doing all that right now. Those are the horror books that I read that turned me from a horror hater to a horror girly. If you guys have any recommendations based off the books I talked about today, please give me some. Also, Stephen King people out there, I love it. I love Pet Sematary. I love 11/22/63. Give me some more books that are similar to those books that you guys think I would like. And yeah, I have a book that's waiting for me and calling my name. So I'm going to bid you guys adieu. And thank you for coming to my little corner. And have a great rest of your day or night or whatever. All right. Bye.